morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome everyone to the zoning board of commission committee retreat. First, we apologize for starting a little late. We had some difficulties. Now we are ready to go. First, we will need an approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Commissioner Laux.
Second.
Second. Thank you, Commissioner Clark. All in favor? Motion passes. Now we will begin. Dr. Moore.
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning, Board of Commissioners. Let me, before I provide an overview of the presentations that you'll be hearing today, a couple of bookkeeping items. One for those that are watching from home. We will take a break from around 11 to 2. The Chamber of Commerce is celebrating their anniversary today, so they've got a luncheon with some representatives there, and so we will be taking a break at that time. For the audience that's in the room, the restroom closest to us, make sure you just pull that snug if you have to utilize the facilities. And then with that, let me get underway with an overview of the presentations that you will hear today. So the first topic that you'll hear from, and we have some guest speakers with us, is focused on the topic of growth management and affordability. Understanding that the entire region is growing. This county is one of the fastest growing counties in the country, and you are the second fastest growing town in the state, located adjacent to the fastest growing town in the state. Understand that growth does not understand boundaries. So even if you are not growing, you will feel the impacts of growth. So saying no to growth still is a decision. And here's what I mean by that. When you say no to growth in your own community, while the rest of the region is growing, you become a more expensive community. So what that means is this: your tax base is at a certain size. And so if communities don't expand that tax base in their value, meaning they don't invest in the properties within the town or they grow the town limits, then the only way to afford the cost of providing services is to raise the tax rate. So you either grow the tax base or you increase the tax rate. Examples being, we've got a picture here of a couple of fire engines. This one on the right, you are about to go to bid. We'll bring you a bid on an award for a signal project that's going to be over $1 million. You'll spend the same amount on this one piece of equipment. The piece of equipment to the left is a little less expensive, $750,000. So the point being is that your expenses to provide services to your citizens will grow. Again, the only way to provide the revenue for that is you grow your tax rate base or you increase your tax rate. You are going to hear from the speakers. There's a few ways to grow the tax base. You can grow out. A lot of communities do that. Or you can grow up. Now, when you grow up, what that means is you densify. You put more density. You use the land you've got in more effective and efficient ways. And that's going to be a challenge for you. That will be a product that you have not seen before. And so the speakers will touch on that. You also run the risk of becoming an exclusive community. So the fair market, more specifically the real estate market, finds ways to meet demand. And so when you don't have the growth, specifically when it comes to residences, when you don't have the volume of growth or the type of housing structures that people need, the real estate market will come in and find a way to meet that need. And one way it meets that need is it looks for those disinvested parts of your community with lower property values, and it cleans them out. And it provides housing for the need that is there. And as a result, people that have been here for a very long time, they get moved out of your community. The other thing that happens when you say no to growth is you become a less affordable community. So right now, Town of Zebulon has a glut of a type of housing unit. A lot of this type of housing unit. Not everyone can afford to get into that housing unit. Not everyone wants that housing unit. And so while they can't buy that type of house, they can rent it. And the way that they can rent it is you have major corporations in Texas and in California who are buying swaths of your neighborhoods and they are renting them out to people. And so as a result, you have people that are coming in, there's nothing wrong with renters, but when you have people coming in that are renting properties that they can't maintain, that are made available to them by these big corporations, which are in your top 10 of your highest property value owners within the town, this becomes a less affordable community. You need to offer not only enough housing, but you have to offer a diversity of the type of housing. And so the speakers will talk about that in greater detail as well. And you also become a more congested community. When you say no to growth, there's a couple of things that happen. One is you lose the revenue that comes in associated with the property tax, the transportation impact fees that they pay, the widenings that they're required to do on the roadways. But the other thing that happens is you lose an opportunity to create a type of development where it is a multi-function development where people don't have to get on the roads to go and provide services, that they can get it within the particular development. And so you can approve growth that helps to address some of the congestion issues. And that goes beyond the fees that they pay and the roads that they widen. It goes to the type of development so that people don't have to spend time on the road to get the services that they need. So again, speakers today, they'll give you an understanding of how the region is growing, how the demographics of the region, particularly your town, is changing. Focus most especially on age. When we look at demographics, sometimes that's a category that we overlook. That's a big driver when talking about the supply and the demand that's out there. And they'll also get into talking about the types of development and the density of that type of development to meet the supply and demand based upon this changing demographic. Next presentation, this is going to be in the afternoon slot. We're going to talk about the bond referendum. So just as a reminder to everyone, a bond is a loan. It's a type of loan. And whenever you take out a loan, you have to make loan payments. Loan payments equals a tax increase. So you're going to hear from your financial advisor about the different bond referendums that are available to you and what could be the tax implications of pursuing 1, 2, 3, or 4 of those bond referendums. The understanding that you don't have to place something on a ballot this November. You can wait until next November, but you are in a position to move this November with 1, 2, 3, or 4 of those. You just got to understand the tax implications. The major funds are needed, meaning on transportation and fire. We're going to need those in 25, so that's why I say you've got some time. You've got a transportation project coming in fiscal year 24. We can figure out a way to float that with money that we've got. So again, you don't have to put a bond referendum on the ballot, but you are in a position to do so if you so decide. You'll also, in the afternoon slot, have a conversation about transportation impact fees at the end of the day. While this is a very simplified equation, and these things can become very complex, and I've talked to one of the speakers about his experience with the city of Raleigh, these things can become very complex. But at its most basic form, it's the transportation impact fee is the cost to widen roads and improve intersections, like the one we've got here, divided by the amount of traffic that is using those roads and intersections. The costs are associated, again, with widening roads, or I put signalized intersections, but you don't necessarily have to signalize intersections. Anything that just makes them more efficient. So roundabouts, you've seen some of those. That's another way to approach it. At the end of the day, the traffic is, where is the traffic originating from? Most often it's coming from residences. Where is it going to? Most often it's going to commercial. So the trick is, where is the traffic coming from? And where is it going to? And what roads is it taking? And what intersections is it going through? How do we assign the cost for those improvements to those you'll hear called trips? So I'd say traffic here, you'll hear probably this morning and definitely this afternoon this term called trips means traffic. Okay? And then finally, you'll round out the mini retreat. You'll be in a position to appoint members to the Main Street Advisory Board. Again, this is some selection guidance for you. Be looking for people that have vested interest. And when I say vested interest, these people that are business owners and/or property owners. The reason I say that is business owners that are in this downtown area, they will have some experiences of what it's like to run a business. They're going to know about the things that ail them, like parking and trash. Those are going to be the two primary things that they focus on first. And so by having members of this board, when they're working on a memorandum of understanding or their bylaws, they're going to have some real-world experience of the things that are hitting them right now, again, which is predominantly going to be parking and trash. The other vested interest is property owners. This entity will come to find out soon that they do not have enough money to function. And so they are going to come to the realization that they will have to tax themselves. It's going to be very helpful if you have property owners of downtown on that advisory board who come to you and say, we've come to the realization, we need some revenue, we're willing to place a tax upon ourselves. So that's what I mean about vested interest as a selection guide for you all when you are appointing members. Experience can be experience that I've just talked about, being a business owner or a property owner downtown. Experience can also be experience on another advisory board or even a Main Street program. But also, this town in particular and the Main Street program in North Carolina has identified this. You've had robust participation from members of your community. And so experiences, if they have been, especially on the ground floor from when you started this process 2 years ago, that's a thing that you may want to consider as a guide to selecting people to sit on this advisory board. And then the last is skill sets. We've talked about the Main Street program has 4 pillars. We've talked about promotions, we've talked about economic vitality, we've talked about design, we've talked about organization. Anyone who's got those kinds of skill sets in those 4 areas is going to be helpful to make this board productive. When you appoint them, they will be assigned the task of crafting a memorandum of understanding and bylaws to come back before you. In talking to the Main Street program in North Carolina, you've got some time on when these things get created, so you don't need to rush these. But you have to appoint board members before July 1st if you want to be considered for the Main Street program in the coming year. There are some administrative functions that have to happen. Specifically, the governor makes an announcement on who the Main Street programs are, and that slot is right around the early part of July. So that's the window. And that's the thing that has to happen before July 1st. So before I recognize Michael Clark to recognize or introduce our speakers, let me pause to see if you have any comments or questions on the things that I covered in the overview. Okay, with that, I'll recognize Planning Director Michael Clark.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the board. The first 2 presentations this morning really circle around growth management. One related specifically to the land uses, the other one related to transportation. One thing that you need to remember is Zebulon will change. That change is going to be dependent upon your vocation as elected officials on whether you choose to grow smart or to not grow. As Joe indicated earlier, both of those do have consequences. As I mentioned last week in the budget presentation, between Wake, Johnson, and Franklin counties, we're expected to grow by another 1 million residents. Not growing results in increased property values and pricing a lot of the existing residents out of the market, so they will be unable to live here. The other side is we need to make sure that we grow strategically. And part of that relates back to our comprehensive land use plan and our transportation plan. This morning, we really brought in kind of an all-star cast when it comes to land use planning and transportation. The first of the presenters is Mitchell Silver with McAdams. Before Mitchell joined McAdams, he was the Parks Commissioner for the City of New York, and previous to that, he was the Planning Director for the City of Raleigh. He's previously served as the president of the American Association. He's also a fellow of the American Institute of Certified Planners. So with that, I'll introduce Mitchell.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's certainly a pleasure to be here. Really enjoyed coming back to North Carolina. I finished my term as commissioner for about 8 years, and I was plan director here, and I always told everybody I was coming back. They thought I was joking. I'm back. The other thing is, as I do, speaking now across the country, a lot of people says, oh, you're from New York, from a big city. What a lot of people don't know is that my parents bought a house in upstate New York and spent my entire summers. We bought 27 acres and spent my entire summer living in what I would consider rural America, next to small towns. We lived on a dirt road, and our highlight of each day was the mail truck. Because we lived on a dirt road, we can hear it about a half mile away, and we all ran to the mail truck to see whether we got mail. We always stopped, we didn't get mail. But it was those experiences that really helped me understand what it is to live in a city and what it is to live in a small town. And so for me, I just enjoyed the full experience. So a lot of examples will be mostly Raleigh, but some other places. So I enjoy doing this. I've been a planner now for 38 years. And when I came to Raleigh, it was my goal to help them really evolve and change in the 21st century. So I'll be covering these 6 topics this morning. This is a retreat, so I want it to be interactive. Anytime you want to stop and ask a question, you can. What I was so impressed, we had a lot of pre-meetings before this meeting. You have an amazing staff. And even after Joe's presentation, I decided to turn to Eric and I said, we're done, we don't have to do anything anymore. You know, he captured it in just that overview, but you have a very competent staff. And I always remember when I was in Raleigh, there was always this debate, you know, when issues were coming up, you want to have public, you know, input, but you also have a very qualified staff that are really resources for you to help you make the right decisions. So we'll cover trends, emerging issues, both national and local, the purpose of planning, land capacity analysis, which was a game changer, which was our impetus to doing our comprehensive plan in Raleigh. What is a growth framework? You heard about a land use plan, but what is a growth framework? We'll talk about that. Then the future land use and value of land, Joe touched on it a bit, but you'll see exactly what that means. When you have this finite resource, you as the governing body can determine the value of what can be built on a piece of property because you have a finite boundary. Yes, you have ETJ and growth boundaries, but that land yields value. And you determine what that value is by how you put the land use designation. And then we'll end on housing affordability versus housing accessibility. So again, anytime you want to stop and ask a question, found some very intriguing information in this presentation. I'll highlight it along the way. So trends and emerging issues. Like I said, we'll talk about national, regional, local, population growth projections, racial composition, demographic profile by generations. That's fascinating. I think you're going to find things you did not know about the town, and then some other census data. First, I've been using this slide for about 20 years. And it's important that we understand the emerging issues that we're facing in the country, in the state, in the city, in the town. It's important because part of our job as staff is to inform you about the emerging issues you have to deal with. You know, we have to watch these trends like a stockbroker watches the market. So you're prepared. And in Raleigh, I was so pleased that when I presented to council about the Great Economy of America, no one talked about that back in 2005. But I presented to the council, and lo and behold, we were ahead of the curve and were prepared for it when it came. We talked about the rise of single-person households. That continues to be a trend. We weren't prepared for it back then. We discussed it with the city council and started putting issues in place. And now I change the slide regularly, and now we're in the era really of the public health crisis. That was a wake-up call, the racial and social justice issues, divisive politics, which is driving the work that we're doing. I've been an appointed official all my years. I have to tell you, the social media is now the new public square, and it's changing the way we're doing business. People now have access to you. And so these are some of the emerging issues and trends we have to talk about. What are they presenting that you need to be prepared for? But this one I have to tell you is a game changer. There's one example, I think I took that slide out, that because I was appointed official, you cannot block anyone because you can't. And so there was this compost facility that we were letting this group use temporarily on a future playground. We said they had till December 31st, and then they had to vacate. Early December, they started putting a blast. The commissioner is evicting Us composters. You
have
composting.
not railroaded composting.
Everyone loves composting, and they
Everyone loves composting, and
overtook
they
my
overtook
social media.
my social
And just for a
media.
month,
And just for a
anything
month.
I would say the
Anything I would
compost, why
say,
won't
say
you
the
talk to us? It
compost,
was
why
just a
won't you talk to us? It was
takeover.
just a
And
takeover.
so, I check with
And
a general
so,
counsel,
I
no, you
check with
can't
a
block
general
us.
counsel, no, you
And
can't
so
block
I had to kind of roll
And so
with it,
I
but there's
had
a
to
new
kind of roll
dynamic,
with it,
all
but
you
there's a
have
new
to do, I'm
dynamic,
sure you
all you
do.
have to do,
Email,
I'm sure you
social
do.
media.
Email,
I'm posting
social
things about my brother
I'm
just
posting
passed
things
away.
about my brother
What about our
just passed
compost?
away.
What about our compost?
Whoa.
So people are very focused on
people
one
are
issue.
very focused on one issue.
I've learned that your
I've
job
learned that your job
is to serve the public
is to
interest,
serve the public
which is the
interest,
opposite of
which is the
self-interest.
opposite of self-interest.
And I always want to find out,
And
this
I always
person
wanna
talking
find
about
out,
the
this
public
person
interest,
talking about the public interest,
or they talk about the
or
self-interest?
they talk about the self.
Because we have to protect the public
Because
health,
we have to protect the public
safety and
health,
welfare of the public.
safety and welfare of the public interest.
So let's talk about some of the
So
trends,
let's talk about
top
some
real
of the
estate
trends,
markets,
top real estate markets
2021.
for
It's
2021.
a Raleigh-Durham Metro with your
Raleigh,
partner.
Durham Metro, with your partner.
Top market. Jill
Top
said it,
market.
we're growing.
Jill said it.
Once
we're growing.
again, Charlotte's there as well.
Charlotte's there as
People are
well.
moving south
People
and
are
west.
moving south
Period.
and west. Period.
South and west. So
South and
people are
west.
coming to
So
this
people
region
are coming
for a lot of reasons. Quality of life, weather, lower taxes, all of those.
All of those.
And then when you look, you can't see this, the top fastest growing metro between 2010 and 2023, the Raleigh Carrier Metro,
Raleigh
is number two.
Metro is number two.
That trend's continuing. It's been like that when I was playing director. This is an ongoing trend where this is a destination that
This is
people
a
want to come to.
destination that people want to come
Which means you have a lot of old-time residents, but you also have a lot of newcomers. But their aspirations and desires about what a town, what a city should be. And I'm sure you hear it.
And I'm sure you hear it.
We also like to look at this from ULI on some of the regional markets around the US. You have the global gateways, international hubs, creative and nimble. Always love talking about the comeback kids. These are cities that hit rock bottom and now they're on the rise. And they're in this research triangle as the creative and nimble category. People are coming here,
People are
they're
coming
highly
here.
educated,
They're
and
highly
they're looking
educated.
for a great lifestyle.
And they're looking for a great.
Those are gonna happen, that's
Those
constant.
gonna happen. That's constant.
So when we look at the trends
So,
for
when we look at the trends
2022,
for 2022.
cost of living was the
Cost
top
of living
concern
was the
for
top
movers
concern
in 2021. And in 2022, it is quality of life.
It was quality of life.
Those are the reasons why people are moving.
Those are the
There was
reasons
a
why
big
people
push
move.
during
Big
COVID.
push during
People were
COVID.
just moving to different cities, primarily because they work from home. They want to move closer to nature with outdoor experiences.
With outdoor experiences, as well as a continuation of remote
Still
work.
kind of working through.
We're still kind of working through what's the future of the workplace, so that's a whole different conversation.
Lowering the tax liability.
Lowering the tax liability is another reason.
The states where people are moving
The
from.
states where people are moving from, California, Illinois, Michigan, Pennsylvania,
These are the top 5 states.
those are the top 5 states.
Pennsylvania replaced New
And
York.
Pennsylvania replaced New York in 2012.
So that's where they're coming from.
So that's where they're coming
Driving up
from.
house
Some people say they're driving up house
See a house
prices.
for
See a
200,000.
house
Are you
for
kidding me?
20,000. Are you kidding me? I'll give you 300.
And it starts raising up all the
And it starts raising up all the properties prices.
And it's a phenomenon that happened.
That is a phenomenon that happened in Raleigh.
Bidding wars.
They were bidding wars.
For a house.
When I was looking
They
for a
said,
house,
we need best and
they
final
said,
offer
we
by
need
4,000.
best and final offer by
That house
4,000.
went for over
And that house went for over
100,000.
100,000 over the
And
estimate.
it has this ripple effect.
And it has this ripple effect, and now people say, I can't afford Raleigh. What about Lingo? What about Zebulon? What about
So what's happening in Raleigh has
So what's happening in Raleigh has a ripple effect for housing prices across the
People will
board.
drive.
People will drive, qualify for
More
more.
interest rates going up.
Now, as interest rates go up, it starts to settle prices. That's
The top 5 inbound states.
top 5 inbound states in 2020, South Carolina, North Carolina, Tennessee, Arizona, and then Florida. As Florida finally surpassed Idaho, because people from California.
Idaho.
And the Idaho's, and then many movers,
Their move resolved around.
their move resolved around the flexibility for remote work or early
So
retirement.
just trying to understand.
So just trying to understand the reasons why people, is it everybody? No.
Based upon the trend.
But based upon the trend, these are why people are moving to North Carolina.
This is your brother.
This is your brother.
Now, when people say, I'm sure
Now,
back
people say, I'm sure back here.
like Zeppelin the way it is.
Like Zeppelin the way it is.
Jumps up, oh, we love it the way it is.
Oh, we love it the way it is. Wonder what
People
people, so I wonder what people thought in 2000.
Where you are today.
Where you are today at 8,000.
People are saying, we don't want to grow, we love it the
People
way
say
it
they
is.
don't want to grow, we love it the way it
We
is.
love it the way it is.
We don't want to grow, we love it the way it is.
We love it the way it is.
We don't want to grow, we love it the way it is. We don't want to work it. We don't want to grow. We love it the way it is.
Please stop.
The thing about stopping.
The thing about stopping is that we have,
In the United States. have
people in the United States have a constitutional right
property.
to develop their
Your
property.
role is to regulate.
Your role is to regulate how they develop their
Some
property.
people divert to
Some
a
people
moratorium,
divert
that's just
to a
laws.
moratorium, that's just
Stop
laws.
laws.
Stop
The
the
question is,
And so the question is, people have a right to develop the property.
how do you manage?
What do you do? How do you
can
manage?
establish rules.
You can establish
Yes,
rules.
you can't
But
develop.
you can't say you can't develop because that's considered a take.
Moratorium is a pause,
Moratorium is a pause,
but to say we don't want to grow.
but to say we don't want to grow, people do have a right to develop the property. So that's something we'll talk
So
about.
you've been growing about.
So you've been growing about 3.3% annually.
Depending on how much land you have.
Depending on how much land
That's
you
the
have.
trend.
That's the trend.
That's your trend.
That's your
Going in
trend.
that direction, it took a
Going in
sharp
that direction, it took a sharp turn. in
Something
2010.
happened in 2010. where
Something
it
happened in
took off.
2010 where it just took
And
off.
that trend is going to continue.
And
And
that
even got
trend is
sharper.
gonna continue. And even got sharper.
2020, that's probably
In 2020, that's probably the COVID pop.
So the question is, do you expect?
So the question is, do you expect it to go down, to flat? That's your trend.
1990,
From 1990 until today.
30-year trend.
That's a 30-year trend.
So, Zebulon?
So,
It doubled
Zebulon
population by
could double its population by 2040.
Are you prepared for that?
Are you prepared for that?
And as Joe said.
And as Joe said, there are
Say
implications.
no, you have to figure
Say
out.
no, you have to
as
figure
we
out
grow,
as we grow, how we're
manage
going to manage
that growth because your population.
that growth
is
because your
expected to be
population is expected to be
50,000.
around 15,000 by 2040.
Those are some of the challenges.
Those are some of the challenges we're facing.
So here are some quick facts.
So here are some quick facts from the American Business Survey, which is part of the population. Your population, 2021, was the last one,
Roughly around
was
8,000.
roughly around
You
8,000.
have households.
You
which
have
are
households,
families
which
per
are
se.
not
They-
families per se, they
But
can
you
be.
have
But
2,400
you have 2,400 households, average household size.
And then there are families.
And then there are families.
And of that, families.
And of that, families are 1,800 of that number.
The size of 3.1.
The size of 3.1, which is pretty large, it's a large families.
And so you have to understand, you don't just have
You have
families.
to understand, you don't just have families. You have households, which means they're both. Which means they're unrelated. So you need to understand to know in your strategic plan standpoint, you have embrace families, but you have households as
So
well.
that's something you need to understand.
So that's something you understand.
This one is interesting.
This one is interesting.
And I don't know if you knew this. On
And I don't know
average,
if you know
United
this.
States.
On average, United
the population
States,
is roughly
the population is roughly 51% female,
49% male. That's
49% male. That's just on average.
Zebulon,
And that's almost 60%.
60%.
60% of the people who live in Zebulon are
I
female.
have not seen it.
I have not seen
I don't
it.
know what it means.
Don't know what it means.
Female-headed
A lot
households.
of female-headed
A lot of
households,
widowers.
a lot of female widowers. The bottom line is
60%.
60% of your population
Which means.
are female, which means 40%
Now,
are
I
men.
don't know what that means.
Now, I don't know what that
Share
means.
with you that I have not
To share
seen
with you that I have not
that
seen
number before.
that number before.
You should be aware of.
So that's something you should be aware of. Farmborn, 60.8%,
housing,
owner-occupied housing, 70%, roughly 70%,
Occupied.
renter-occupied, around
We'll go deeper into that.
We'll go deeper into that once we get to that
And
housing.
you can stop me at any
And
time.
you can stop me anytime, if that surprises you,
60% of the town.
60% of the town is women.
It does.
It does.
And I don't know what it means.
And I don't know what it means, I'm just sharing it, because I like to do these,
Understand.
just to understand.
When you look at guidelines or small boards and things like that, people that are applying to, you can see that.
I can get that.
I can get that.
I can show
Well,
you. I mean, I have to
show
dig that a
yes.
lot deeper.
I mean, I have to dig that a lot deeper, but yes, we can.
You see it also in small businesses, about small businesses.
Yeah, that's surprising, because like I
Yes,
said.
that's surprising, because like I said,
classes,
I teach classes,
students
and
include
I always ask the
demographics.
students to see demographic, I've seen the worst 52-48. I have not seen 64.
So that's very, very interesting.
So that's
To
very,
me,
very interesting.
Part
To
time,
me,
I want
as
to make sure.
part time, I want to make sure our spaces are safe.
To me, that is like, you know,
They also may have better credit.
It could be divorcees, single person households,
usually
you know,
outlive
women,
men,
usually outlive
widowers.
men,
That is
be
the
widowers,
interesting
but that is an interesting number I did not expect to see.
So, other realities.
So, other realities, we're getting older, people living longer, we have more people with disabilities, more multi-generational households, homes sandwich generation, so people in their 40s have kids that didn't give their parents. So they call that the sandwich generation, plus mothers, COVID, more single mothers,
National.
more than 50% national of all households now still women, married, fewer people getting married, and then immigration, and then the minority majority, which a lot of people are kind of freaking out about, but we're heading in that direction.
So, I wanted
So,
to take
I wanted to take a little bit of a dive,
So
and
kind
I,
of an oldie and a
sort
goodie.
of kind of an oldie and a goodie.
Mike and Joe, Steve,
Mike and Joe,
years
Steve,
ago.
presented this years
First
ago.
plans that started
one of the first plans that started generation profiles, planning graphics into planning, because people didn't understand the connection.
About people.
I don't use language about people, not just about the
So
place.
years ago, back
back in 2008, 7, came out with this generational profile that didn't make it possible. I started doing analysis to make planning, so back here are the generations. On average, there were 6 living at any given time, so see great generations about to leave us
because
forever.
the youngest,
Because our oldest, the youngest is around 99.
So there's a greatest silent.
So there's a greatest silent
X,
over
Y, Z, and then now
X, Y, Z, and then now alpha.
Now, I'm going to
Now, I'm going to generalize
generations to make
these
a point.
generations to make a point.
Personally,
I'm
I'm just
taking
trying
it
to show
personally,
you
I'm
the
just trying to
difference
show you the differences
generation.
between the generations because they live. Exactly.
And they come with an
And they come with an orientation
about
what a town is supposed to
what a
be.
community is supposed to
What
be.
a community is
The
supposed to be.
values were supposed to
The
be.
values were supposed
And
to
they
have.
differ from
And they differ from generation to
And I remember
generation.
when I was doing this
And
research.
I remember when I was doing this research, my wife was X, my sons were Y, my daughters were Z, my father was greatest, my stepmother was
And I studied them.
And I studied them and tested these questions
orientation.
to see the orientation. For the most part, it was generally true.
You'll see why I'm explaining
And you'll
this.
see why I'm explaining this, because as you do your work,
these folks
these folks love to come to public meetings.
they want to engage in.
They want to engage in a very
So
different
when you're
way.
in a meeting,
So when you're in a meeting,
you only hear from this group.
and you only hear from this
You've
group,
now not heard from
you've
those
now
that say,
not heard from those that say, I'm not involved. I'd rather do
Media,
something in social media. I'd
They
rather
come to
do
public meetings.
They come to public
not
meetings.
hearing
And so you're not hearing the
representation.
true representation of who lives in Zebulon.
I've always been told, don't upset the AAR people. They vote.
But at the same time,
But at the same time,
not for all.
this is a town for all.
And their needs may be
And
different.
their needs may be different than this group.
All right, so let's go through.
All right, so
the
let's go
race
through
generation.
the race generation.
By way of disclosure.
Just by way of
My
disclosure.
father, when he went to
My
World
father,
War II.
when he went to World War
My
II.
father, 2 years.
That's my father a few years before he passed.
So my father's greatest
So
generation.
my father's greatest
99 years
generation,
older.
they're 99 years older
Which
today.
means there's not going to
Which
be
means there's not going to be many of them left over the next 5 and 10 years. We do have some Tarians, but we don't have many people live past 150.
So what is it about this generation?
So what is it about this generation?
Experience the Great Depression.
They experienced the Great Depression,
Fought in World War II.
fought in World War II,
Understood the value of money.
understood the value of money and savings. My father didn't believe touch a credit card, didn't believe
No
it.
credit. Buy it.
No credit,
Pay
you
for
buy
it.
it,
If you did have a
pay
credit
for it.
card.
If you did have a credit
Bill
card,
came in, paid the whole
the bill came in, you paid the whole balance, zero balance.
Now, what was interesting about
And
this.
what's interesting about this
They
generation
understood the meaning
is
of
they
hard work.
understood the meaning of hard work and shared.
And I have to say that there was summed it up best. The reason why they were the greatest, this generation gave their today for our tomorrow. And we've not seen the generation since then. That's what makes this generation the greatest generation. People tend to live in the same neighborhood, you know, grandma lived 2 blocks away, everything was contained until after the World War II, people just split apart. But this was the greatest generation, so different. My father would take us to garage sales to buy anything. We didn't buy anything. We did hand-me-downs. That was that lifestyle. I want to buy a pair of jeans. My father said, here's your brother's jeans. Just understood the value of money. Because of the Great Depression, we heard stories from him about how difficult it was. And he understood the value of money. Then we moved to the silent, mature generation. They're 77 to 98 years old. They're also known as the post-war Eisenhower generation. They grew up after the war, the suburbanization of America, when people were living in cities, and for the first time, to be an American means you owned a home on a piece of property, a car, picket fence, freedom. You know, this generation, this was the emergence of what they call the traditional American family. It happened under this period. They also understood the value of money and savings, and this was the rise in manufacture, the middle class that we're known today, came out of this generation. So this generation struggles with people saying, hey, I want to live downtown. Wait, I only go downtown to pay a bill, visit a courthouse, or to visit someone in prison. You don't live downtown. It's single-family homes. That is the lifestyle. Urban density? No. It's single-family. That's the American way. And so we don't fault, but this is the orientation that there was this explosion in the United States of the suburbanization of America after the war. And so that's this generation. They're also the parents of boomers and Gen X. The leaders of the civil rights movement were born during this time.
Then we get to what I believe the greatest generation on the face of the planet. The boomers. Now, for the time being, the boomers was the largest generation of all generations. They were now replaced with Gen Y. There are about 76 million of them. These became the CEOs and leaders and our decision makers today. They lived through Vietnam. But there was one thing that was a problem, is that it was the emergence of consumerism and credit. Did not exist before. Now you can buy something, I want it right now, and I'll pay for it later. And with that, we saw personal debt just explode. Not mortgages, not homes, just stuff. Materialism, consumerism, and because of that, the Great Recession happened under the boomers' watch. I want it now. You don't have time to spend with your kids, that's okay, I'll buy your love, I'll just buy you. What about the price? I'll pay later. So there was this desire of lifelong prosperity, entitlement, that the boomers felt they were immortal, and recently they've been labeled because of what's happening. This is a recent occurrence, not an older one, the angry generation about what is happening to the country. And so these are some things we're grappling with, but the point I wanted to get, because of this debt and where we are, the greatest generation wanted to give their today, they wanted to give their tomorrow for our today. This generation, they want to give your tomorrow for their today, the opposite of the greatest. I'm in charge, I'm in control, I make policy, I want you to live the way I want you to live. And now with this debt, we're giving away young people's tomorrow. That's a big dilemma that we're dealing with. Now let's go to the Gen X generation. Now we have the baby bust generation, the me generation. All these children, all of a sudden, women started going back to the workforce, divorce rates started to rise, you had the erosion of the traditional family. Now it's not uncommon to have a household with stepfather, stepdog, stepcat, stepbrother. It's different, and now they have less children. It's rare when you see a Gen X have 3 or 4 brothers and sisters. That was a boomer thing, not Gen X. And so you had the emergence for the first time of, when I grew up, they had a latchkey kid. I don't know if you heard that term. But then it was daycare centers. They didn't exist when I grew up. Auntie took care of you, grandma took care of you. And now we put them off into this facility because women were going back to the workforce. A big disruption to the traditional family, but that's the X. And so, I think, this was also a rise of creative class. So I think Gen Xers, they were the only child, so they had all these imaginary friends. So they became the creative class. But for them, it's very important. They don't like to be micromanaged, and for them, the work-life balance is very important. And they're the ones leading the way to, I'm working at home. I'm not going back to the office. I enjoy the lifestyle of working hybrid. So that's the Gen X. Not many of them around. That's Gen X. Oh, then we get to Gen Y.
Whoa.
The probably biggest disruptor.
Whoa.
Are you Y? Okay. This was the most disruptive generation since we saw in the 1960s. Changed everything. This is when cities started becoming cool again, because this generation, to me, place mattered. I can't live in the suburbs. I need place. I need interaction. And so this generation would actually move to a city without a job. Why? Because they love the experience. I'm like, are you kidding me? Before, when we grew up, we had a job, we moved. This generation, I just need a place. I'll find a job later. Known as millennials, hipsters, echo boomers. This is now another boom generation. And they want choice. We raise them on choice. Give us an example. When I grew up, well, I'll put it this way. When I was raising my child, my daughter would come down, speak to my mother, my wife, and say, Mom, what's for breakfast? My wife would say, you could have pancakes, cereal, bagels, this whole menu list. When I grew up, you had 2 choices. You either ate or you didn't eat. That was it. But today, it's like a menu of choices, and so we've really raised Generation Y as demanding choices. Don't give me this binary yes or no. I want choices. And so, they become trophy kids. No one loses, everyone wins. I know you came in last place, but you showed up, here's a prize. And the resilience of this generation, sometimes they're soft. Except people who are on the Board of Commissioners. They're more racially and culturally tolerant. than previous generations. When I look to the future about what's happening in this country, thank you, Gen Y and Z. I have hope for the future. They'll work it out. They prefer an urban lifestyle, environmentally conscious. They're not materialistic like the boomers. They reject the consumerism. They just live with less. They are consumers of experiences, and place matters, not just the job. Different. Different. Now we get to another change. These, the generation that pushed the whole social movement, Gen Z, the rise of veganism, not for health reasons, because they're concerned about the planet. They understand gender identity and non-binary. This is such a controversial issue. My daughter and I have debates about this all the time, but this generation is serious about it. I don't know where this came from, why, but it's part of their identity as this generation. For them, gender identity and non-binary, it's just exploding. You probably know it. They've rejected cable TV. I'll never forget my daughter said, take the TV out. They just want streaming, not network. They want to customize the viewing experience, and now it's transcended all culture where there's more streaming than ever before. First African-American elected president. Now we're seeing another bus generation for Gen Z. Rise of social media happened under their watch. They, like Gen Y, are extremely environmentally conscious and concerned about climate change because it's now their future. One of their number one concerns is climate change. And so people in power are like saying, it's not even a thing. No. That's the clash that's happening. So just letting you know that each generation. The last one is tough because they just arrived on the scene. Let's keep an eye on this generation. Their early childhood development was in the pandemic. No social interaction. And I kept saying when this was happening, I was commissioner at Parks, and we shut everything down. And I'm saying, what about these kids? No social interaction in early childhood development. I have no idea what's going to happen as they grow up, what impact those early formative years will have. Please keep an eye on this generation. All right. So let me just move on. So I did this generational profile of Zebulon, pertaining to Wendell, Raleigh, Wake County, North Carolina, United States. And then I also want to know who's under 40 and who's under 55. And the reverse is who's over 40 and who's over 55. A couple of surprises. Greatest, had to combine greatest and silent because there are so few. Zebulon, 6.6% of your population are in that category. You're higher than everyone in your region, including the national average and the state average, 6.6%. Boomers, you're 18.5%, a little bit lower than some of the other places. This one shocked me. Your largest generation is Gen X. And my guess is they're moving here because of the lifestyle, they can work at home, but Gen X is your largest population, and Gen Y 19%, Gen Z 23%, and then Alpha 5%. Your median age, the highest to get in the region at 40.2. So residents under 40 by percentage is 48.5%, and then under 55, 75%. So when you have public meetings, who's showing up? Because you're under 55, it's 75%. If you're over 55, that's a quarter of your population speaking out on issues. You need to make sure you hear from all voices, but this is yours, you have it, you can look at it and understand demographically where you're coming from. So you know the trend is this number is going up as the population is aging, but your predominant population here is Gen X, here in Zebulon. So what does this all mean? The values, needs, and aspirations drive consumer preferences and market demand for what Zebulon should be, based on their generational profile, and you're there trying to sift through that to make sure you do the right thing. As I stated, previous generations were consumers of goods, but the newer generations are consumers of experiences, and close to 50% of your population want experiences. That's what they want. We should not just be designers and planners, but experience builders. How do we create an experience? It's a beautiful ministry. This is what people want. This is what I want to gravitate to. We have to build those experiences so people can stay.
So with that said, it's kind of explaining the social district, how it's kind of succeeding in different communities because they're looking at experience coming out.
Yes.
Can we get that going? Okay.
Yeah, the social, yeah, because that's an interesting concept, but I'll leave that there. By 2030, 1 in 5 Americans will have a disability. I think we'll be over the age of 65. 1 in 5 will have a disability. You're seeing the dramatic change of people over 76 that are getting older. By 2050, the number of Americans over 85 will triple. nationally from 5.4 million to 19 million. This is an interesting trend, is that they're finding across the board, land use patterns and transportation choices will change. On average, 600 people over the age of 70 in the US stop driving every year because they can't. How will they be mobile? Now, there are people that can drive until they're 80, but this is a national number. Don't know how many here in Zebulon, but we don't want people to be isolated, and they want to have transportation. If it's just a car, yeah, there are driverless cars, yeah, there's Uber, but there are implications for those that can't drive. And then the local tax base for local governments may be challenged as seniors seek property tax relief, something to keep an eye on. Other issues, it's not just about what's next, it's about who's next. I believe it's not left or right, but there's this clash of values between 20th century and 21st century values, and you're going to see that play out as you probably do here in Newtown. In terms of demographics, 45% white, 43% black, Hispanic, but I wanted to see the change over time, and this too surprised me. Since the 2010 census, the white population increased by 2.2%, black population decreased by 7.8%, and the Hispanic population increased by 5.2%. Did you even know that? The population's changing. Don't know why. Some could say, oh, gentrification, this and that. Well, Hispanic population increased by 5.2%. So this is the change that you're seeing, and the white population's increased over the past 10 years. The Hispanic population increased, but the black population, Asian was very small. So that is a trend that's happening here. What that means, I don't know, but just let you know that is what's happening here within your borders. So I'm going to quickly go through 10 critical elements that will make tomorrow's communities. This is part of the national presentation I give to give you 10 things to watch out for.
Is this what you talked about at City Vision?
Yes,
Yeah. Okay.
but I'm only doing one slide per item.
All right.
I'm sorry, I can give you the presentation, you want to see that. So this is just one for each. Number one, so I'll just go through one by one. Well, number one, healthy living and fitness for life. This is a trend that's happening all over. The 55 plus are staying active. As I said, they're living longer. They want access to biking and walking and greenways and trails and sidewalks. They look for a place that has these amenities. They're coming with money. They're retiring early, as I mentioned to you. 55 plus, not 65, 55 plus. And they're looking for a place that offers a lifestyle. And then I just put pickleball will continue to grow. This is a phenomenon I've seen that there was actually some people in New York City, these older people kicked kids out of a playground because they wanted to play pickleball. How sad is that? The police had to come. Could you imagine these older people telling the kids, get out of the playground? But the trend is going crazy. Access to recreational amenities. You cannot do it alone, Zebulon. You have to look at the region. And so you want to make sure what Wake County is doing, what your neighbors are doing, because folks are looking for, they want regional assets, they want proximity to parks and trails. People don't just buy they buy a place, they don't buy a home. People don't just buy a home, they buy a place. That's why they check out all the experiences and amenities that come with it. And then parks, in my opinion, not just for physical health, but it's also for mental health as well. So that's critically important. Traditional neighborhood development. This is what they're looking for. Hard to get it in one home. You'd like to see a subdivision developed. They're looking for traditional, walkable, close proximity to shopping, human scaled, a range of housing choices and options, not just single family. People are looking for different types. Townhomes right now, it's a trend that's exploding. Same value of home, just a different style, more compact, and they want to preserve some open space and they want to have a strong sense of place. So that's kind of the traditional neighborhood development. Placemaking, so important. Create an experience, we talked about it. Authentic and memorable. You have unique downtown. You want to keep it and just add to it because it's not like Holly Springs. It's not like Morrisville. It's authentic to Zebulon. You want to keep it that way. The power of 10, that's a rule of thumb. Every town, every city should have 10 destinations with 10 things to do within each destination. It's called the power of 10. And then it should be people-centered, not project-centered. Post-COVID, big question mark. All we know is that people want to have access to the outdoors.
And so this is still being worked out. What's the future of office? Where do people want to live? Will they come back to work? Whole big conversation happening about this. What we heard recently is that this is now the rise of what they call the meta city. We heard mega city. Richard Florida was on a presentation with him on Monday. The meta city, where now people are living in this virtual world, Zoom, Teams, WebEx, and now they can work at home, maybe come to the office. So it's the rise of the meta city that has no boundaries. Housing choices, we'll get into this later. Diversity of product types, variety of housing types, Joe already said it. There's this huge trend that now single-family homes are now being rented. So when someone says we want single-family homes, don't assume it's going to be owner-occupied. It could be rented. The question is, as you look at the value of land, is that where you want to go? Okay. Access to social gathering places, so important. North Hills and other places, putting a lawn and some commercial around it, people are gravitating to them. They don't just they want to see other people, especially post-COVID. People are just out and about. Just want that social interaction. Where are those places? In Zebulon. Something that you and your team can create. Understand the value of land. We'll get into this shortly. Any questions about those 10 trends? So those are the things that everyone's taking a look across America as the 10 things they need to focus on. I'll pause here for questions. Okay. Purpose of planning. Planner, as we stated, I was president of the American Planning Association, an organization of 42,000 members in 92 countries. And so this is something that I find near and dear to my heart. Love the profession, so I just want to walk you through. So you have a strategic plan, you have a land use comprehensive plan, and then you have a transportation plan, and I believe you have a parks plan. So we're going to go into the importance of plans. A lot of places I went to was like, I don't get it. And I say, I compare a plan like a retirement. Okay? At 65, I want to save this much of money. I want to be here at the age of 65. What do I need to do each year to help me reach that goal? That's what a comprehensive plan is. 2030, 2040, 2050. When we get to this place, this is where we want to be. So it's not the Board of Commissioners plan. It's not the mayor's plan. It's the public's plan. But far too often, in my experience, if we adopt it, it's that Board of Commissioners plan. No, it's the public's plan because you're going on this process together to say, what will this town look like in 2030 and 2040, and then follow it. Not say, well, we're new, that was the old group, let's start. It's a plan to get to 65, that golden age. We're ready. We did all the right things. Do the pedestrian stuff, do this, do that. Look, we got there. Yes, Mayor.
I think one of the things that is probably concerning is how often you need to update that plan.
Every 5 years.
Because, with things rapidly changing
Correct.
all the time, it's almost like that plan needs to be tweaked.
Absolutely right. Mayor, you're absolutely right. Typically, you do an annual review,
Okay.
and then you update it every 5 years because you don't want the plan to be obsolete. So Mayor, you're exactly on target. So you do a 25, 30-year plan. They have different time horizons, but you do an annual review, and then you do a 5-year update. So,
I once,
yeah.
I don't know, something where I put in something like, how do I become a millionaire? And it came back that I would have to live to be 101 years old first.
That's possible these days, you know.
That's possible.
That's true. That's true. So the role of planning is to manage growth and change. I think Joe said it at the top of the presentation. The role of planning is to manage growth and change. Not stop growth and change, because it's going to happen. It's to manage growth and change. And it deals with risk and uncertainty about the future. My job as plan director when I was in Raleigh, we had a city council, I got your back. I'm watching for these trends, and I'm going to bring issues before you because I care about this community, I care about the future, I got your back. These are the risks and uncertainties that you need. But what I also liked about the plan is that it offered predictability for developers, for the residents, and for the decision-making body about where we're going as a community. We thought it all through. So you don't have to have these battles for every single zone. It gets, no, we have the plan, here are the policies. We did the heavy lifting for you. Just sit back, say, are you consistent or inconsistent, and then you vote. We want to make sure we take that risk and uncertainty about the future. We have to have a special concern for the long-term consequences of present actions, but as Joe said, there are consequences for no actions. If you don't make a decision, that problem does not go away. There are consequences for kicking the can down the road. There are consequences. And our job, if you permit us, to staff, and I did this in Raleigh and I was sweating at the podium, council wouldn't make a decision, excuse me, I have to share with you the implications if you make that decision. If you still vote that way, I'm fine. Please give me the permission to share the implications of this decision. And sometimes there are some towns that will allow their staff to do that, and there are times they will not let their staff to do that because they don't want to be in an uncomfortable situation. So that's a decision this body has to make. And then when you say no to something, you're actually saying yes to something else. What are you saying yes to? When I was in Raleigh, it was like no density, no rental, no. I'm saying that what you're really saying is seniors and young people coming out of NC State School, we don't want you in Raleigh because they couldn't afford these single-family homes. So when you say no to something, you're saying yes to something else. And always think about we're saying no, but then what are we saying yes to? So that is part, when I was staff, Eric and I would share. Saying no also means saying yes. And I don't know what that is, but that's something you need to think about as you're making a decision. Okay. Plan versus code. I don't know about Zebulon. When I was in Raleigh, people thought the plan was a law. It was going to change your life. You New Yorker, you're coming in here with your crazy. I'm like, no. A plan's a policy. Zone, code, that's law. So, but the plan set up the code. The plan should have your vision and values. A plan helps local government manage growth or change, decision-making, public improvements, and capital investment. That's what the plan is. But some people say, oh, don't you plan? No, that's the code. Pay attention to the code. This is the planning process, vision and values. And then you have to make a decision if you're going to be a plan-making town or a deal-making town. A plan-making town has a blueprint, they have rules, they follow the plan. Deal-making town is like, let's just negotiate as we go along the way. Developers prefer a plan-making town. There are the rules, this is where we can do something, but we always believe, no, you can have deals. But the question is, when you do your planning, when you have a blueprint, when you have a plan, you follow the plan. There's no mystery. The public knows what it is, developers, you do. And then the development code makes some of those things law. Difference between plan and code, you have both. You need to understand the distinction. So I already said this, so I'll pass on that one, but this became very controversial. I went to Charlotte and shared that with them. I said, okay, Charlotte, which one are you? Plan making or deal making? The whole audience screamed, deal making! And it became front page news. And they decided for the first time to focus on being a plan making city, and they decided to do a comprehensive plan. Controversial, but to me that's very important.
I think another issue too is, we have certain bills in the legislature that will it's counterproductive in a lot of things that we try to do as a municipality.
I would not disagree. We dealt with that on a regular basis. As we were doing our plan in Raleigh, they were actually developing legislation because we didn't want to have what we call snout houses. Snout houses where the garage sticks out way out here and the front door's out there, which can be a safety issue. The General Assembly, the home builders went to them and said, we need to fix this. And they said, you cannot regulate where the door's going to be. The answer is yes. You have to work around that. You have talented staff. We would sit down as a staff. Eric and I worked together. And when the General Assembly issued a new statute or a modification, we had to figure out, what do we do? That's just par for the course.
I'm so sorry, this is not related. We're having live feed issues, and I'm getting messages that we're having live feed issues.
We're well aware, we're trying to troubleshoot it.
Okay, all right. When we do these types of meetings, if we can't get this figured out, we need to be back at town hall. I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
Thank you so much.
It's okay. I don't know people allow everyone. Okay.
That's okay, they can't see you apparently.
So, just sharing with you some of the challenges when I came to Raleigh. Eric, I don't know if you remember this. So, Raleigh had a small town identity. Raleigh, in the early 2000s, had a small town identity. So I said, which became somewhat controversial, that we had to transition from Mayberry to Metro. A lot of people said, we're not Mayberry, Mayberry's over here. I said, you got a statue of Andy Griffith in Pullen Park. And so we knew we had to transition because the city was now past 300,000 people, but they still felt that they were a small town. And so that was something we had to work through. We were getting 12 to 15,000 newcomers a year. And people were saying, I don't want to grow. Keep Raleigh, don't change. I'm saying, we're growing 12 to 15,000 people a year. You'll see in a second, we'll run out of land in 20 years. Raleigh was not aware of the demographic shifts. I had to share that with them to know that our population is changing. We were not tracking emerging issues. The city was dominated by small area plans. So 2/3 of our comprehensive plan was small area plans. Only 1/3 was citywide guidance. And then we did not offer choices for new people coming in. So that leads me to this land capacity analysis, which I will encourage your team do about growth projections and land availability. So I actually did this at a women's T-car, I think it was called, in Raleigh, and all of a sudden all the news crews started coming. I didn't know what I did, but so we had our staff figure out how should Raleigh manage growth over the next 20 years. We determined Raleigh had to find in the next 20 years where to build 120,000 dwelling units, not houses, dwelling units, which equal 270,000 people by 2030. We had to figure out where to put 170,000 jobs, that much square feet, as well as land for infrastructure. The problem is, we only had 19,000 acres left in our jurisdiction, and another 20,000 in our ETJ, which meant that if we kept building 4 units to the acre, we'd run out of land in 20 years. That was it. We would run out of land if we kept building 4 units to the acre, and that's when the news crews came. The real estate market said, what do you mean we're running out of land? They used to look around Raleigh, see all these trees and forests. No. Developable land, there's only a finite amount. And we keep building these single families, we will run out of land. Freaked out for about a week. What do? We need a plan. And that's what we did. I'll stop now just because when I showed you that projection line, I don't know how much developable land you have left. Because you can take a parcel, subdivide it. So that is an analysis which we did to determine how much land you have left to develop. Will it be single family or will it be something else? That's an analysis you have to undertake, and that will determine, because you're going to get, without any intervention, the prediction is 15,000 people by 2040. A population of 15. Double your population by 2040, yes.
Now, when you did this analysis and you came up with the 85 million square feet, I'm assuming that that was prior to COVID, and we know that those numbers,
This was done, you're absolutely right, this was done around 2007. So you're absolutely correct. There's a formula that you use as a job housing balance, is how we came up with this number, and then we came up with this number of non-residential. You're absolutely right.
Is there a
This was
better
pre-COVID.
understanding now of what kind of square footage, like towns and municipalities actually will need? I mean, I know that we're still coming out of COVID and that, we don't really have a full understanding of work from home.
This one is tough. I'm sure I can come out with a formula to suggest what that is, to see where the real estate trends are going, but you're absolutely right. Plus, this is a city compared to a town. This absorbs a lot of office. My guess is here you'll have light manufacturing, you'll have retail, you'll have shopping. It's going to be different, so this number will not be the same. This was for Raleigh, assuming we get all these influx of high-tech and medical businesses. So yeah, this number will be different. This is the one I should focus on, just to show that you need land for housing, you also need land for businesses, and you need land for open space, schools, and other facilities.
And is there a rubric, is there a percentage that you like to see being a parks planner in New York, as far as open space per X number of people?
Open space and parks are different.
Right,
The variety in New York City is about 15% of our footprint, 20% of our footprint are parks, both local, state, and national. It's about 20%. That is a good number, but that's for a dense city. There are some cities that go as high as 30%. But again, you are a lower density area, so the need for parks, New York City is 27,000 people per acre. Here, I think it's 1,000 people per square mile. So the density is different, and people don't have backyards, so parks are elevated. But I would say 20-30% is a good measure. But then again, like I said, this is more of a lower density area where people can literally have open space in their front yard and backyard.
right, okay, good, thank you.
Any questions about this before we go to the growth framework? All right, so we'll talk about vision, values, blueprint, where will you grow, and where is change expected? You have a vision in your strategic plan. I read it. You have a few values there, and then you have your framework. As I stated, there are 3 plans that you have: the comprehensive land use, transportation, and parks and rec. So you have some direction about where you're going to go. Forward, the question is, do you want to do a comprehensive plan versus separate plans? That's a conversation you can have with your team. So you have a strategic plan. It's about 11 pages. And your core values to serve the community is honesty and integrity, family, respect, dependability, and teamwork. As I mentioned to you, there's also households, because it's not the same as family, and you saw you have quite a few households in your town. And then here's your strategic plan in advance: vibrant downtown, small town life, growing smart. So that is, for now, the direction that you're sharing with the public. This is your land use plan. The land use plan should be converted to your code, because the two should be in sync, so the public can expect what's coming. To go a little bit deeper and look at your strategic plan: vibrant downtown, revitalize downtown, develop events, entertainment, cultural attractions, draw people downtown, small town life, promote more community events and festivals, enhance and create more community gathering places. Oh, what are those top trends? So you're on it. Increase connectedness and walkability in the community. That was it. And then growing smart, which is a recurring theme. You want to be able to meet the demands for transportation, for housing, economic development, and really help the community and staff grow to serve executively. So that's your strategic plan. Strategic, short horizon. The question is, do you want to have a 2040, 2050 to really establish that blueprint? That's a conversation you can have with staff or at this retreat. There are some of the social gathering places. You're seeing this happening more and more. That's what it is. It's really creating a social gathering place. It's low density. It can fit into a town. People are looking for these places. In Raleigh, we came up, these were our 6 themes, which are still the case today. Am I right, Eric? Probably still the same. This was put together not by staff. This was collectively by the community. We had about 6, went to public meetings, they changed it. These were the 6 that basically was the framework for our plan. This was our future land use plan, but I felt the public did not. Commissioner, do you understand what this map is? You don't. So we decided to come up with this map. And this is the map that has helped communicate where we're going to grow. Everything you see here. Okay. Can we take a break to check the live feed? Any questions while we have a break? So this was a game changer. This growth framework map to say, everything you see in yellow, see all the yellow? Relax. Nothing's going to change. Your single family neighborhood, nothing's going to change. But if it has a color on it, that's we wanted 60 to 70% of all new growth to go there. We call it polycentric. You don't have to drive downtown. You now have this local area that you can go to, like a mini downtown that has all the services you need, so you don't have congestion. Here's downtown. We had 8 growth centers and 12 multimodal corridors, and that's where we wanted to grow to go. Higher density, mixed use. Not here, we're here at these places. So the developers knew,
residents knew, and you knew. No more fights. Oh my goodness, where did that come from? No, we planned for it. Downtown South, Midtown, Briar Creek, around the arena, all predicted. So when a density came, but residents, what they still do, oh, look at the density. If you say no to density here, it gets pushed out into neighborhoods, and it's exactly what happened in Raleigh.
How were the development nodes selected, or did you just use what was trending in order to, interpret where that growth was going to take place?
We selectively chose, working with Eric and his team, because transportation and land use go together. So Briar Creek was an emerging retail center. We wanted to add residential because the density was there. And as Eric will share with you, you can now walk there versus driving there. So downtown was the easy one. We then looked at what made the most sense. So this is West Raleigh, around the arena, State Fairgrounds, Cameron Village District, Midtown, Triangle Town Center. And the corridors, Glenwood, all the major corridors, we said you need to put more density on the corridors so we can have bus rapid transit or transit. So we thought through where could we densify so that these neighborhood folks won't say, oh my goodness, what are you doing? We did carefully pick land use and transportation to pick these locations.
So how does this translate to a town our size?
Let's go back. So, on your future land use map, right now, you see all this yellow? This red is commercial. Commercial, is there a decision along this route or intersections? This one is, can it be there? Can it be, right now you have, looks like industrial here. You look at your land use map and start to pick, I'm assuming this is your downtown. So you can start to pick those intersections and the land use and figure out where it can go. I would start with your shopping centers. Is there an aging out shopping center that now you can allow 2-story, 3-story mixed use? That's what everyone's doing. We did it in Raleigh, now Cary's doing it, Morrisville, everyone's doing it. You have the parking, not all used. And I was going to show examples. So the answer is, if you do a study, working with the community, you find out which one makes the most sense, particularly if you're going to widen, which Eric will talk about, some of those facilities, more movement, easier to get to, and density makes more sense.
Does it make more sense to revisit a plan if, say, we've got, that one blue area on the map that's industrial? Should we revisit that as far as the land use plan goes to, as a potential residential area? Or
Light industrial always has potential for brownfields, but that's something I defer to Michael. If you want to take this exercise, you look for where is development opportunity that makes sense, that has public support, so it's a relationship between you. But if you know you're growing, I don't know if I showed that slide before. Where is it? I had one. Yes, okay. So this is an exercise done by ULI. I was part of a team where they say, okay, the region is growing by X amount. Yellow is residential, red is commercial. They put all the dominoes on the map, all the Legos on the map, and as a team, they say, where are they going to go? And people say, I don't want to go anywhere. No, they're coming. Where's it going to go? You can do a similar exercise for Zebulon. If 8,000 more people are coming, where? And that's when the region realized we can't just do it on single family. We can't. We have to begin to densify. And so there were 21 teams. I'm proud to say my team, Vibrant Centers, won. And so that's what this is. And this is the whole region. People said, I get it. Because you had to use all the Legos. And they started really, well, where's it going to go? We started picking places where density can go. You need to do the same exercise. So that's working with your planning staff. They're very competent. What makes sense? Either you look at vacant land or you reposition existing land. Those are your choices. So you start with that map. So I checked with my predecessor, Ken Bowers, 10 years later, and guess what? Of all the new growth in Raleigh,
65% is where we said it was going to go. But what happened is there were council that started pushing back and saying no. What was the implication? Now developers are going into neighborhoods to take down single-family homes to build townhomes. Because the pressure was there, and council said, no, you can't build 40, no, you can go up to 40, we can't do 40 stories, let's do 20. So that demand squeezed out into the neighborhoods. So they said no. Okay, they said no. And you witnesses, Eric, am I right? It was sad. So now there's new council that's rethinking it. We decided to do a polycentric approach. So we disperse traffic. I live right about here. These blue areas are shopping areas. So now you have all these choices. So not everyone is coming to downtown as a hub and spoke. You now have options and choices, and people love having options.
So you're saying like, okay, when I go to Raleigh, I see the Broad Street owned by Shaw there. Initially, when the developer said, no, that's not, I'm seeing where you see this is being out home next to Reynolds House, it's about 91%. That was affected that's the 11%. I mean, Broad Street, that Shaw area is changing. So
It's changing. We'll get to gentrification in a second because it is a trick, or revitalization is tricky. Because in that particular case, when I was in Raleigh, I told them we need to start providing more density. Otherwise, if you don't, gentrification is on its way. And people said, we don't believe you, and then gentrification came. Different circumstance, but you're right. Living right next to downtown, land values increased, density was low, which means a higher price per square foot, and people sold their property to move somewhere else.
That's what I'm saying, the price just the dirt, $350,000 for 0.2 acre, a little bit involved. That's on Broad Street. That's it's wild.
It is wild. That's why I ended up living, like I said. I wanted to live here. Ended up here. Couldn't afford it.
Okay.
So all that trend, and then we use that plan to start creating what I call great, we went to action, great streets, places, and spaces, so we started to really push to urbanize all these areas as a result of that blueprint. That's now the blueprint. It was a blueprint. We had to figure out how to get these things happening, and all that happened during that time. So here's an example. You don't have to do it like this, but here's an example. This is in the town of Morrisville, Park West Village. You now have mixed use, very attractive. These people aren't going to drive. You think they're going to drive to go over there? No. Eric will talk more. The trips are captured in that project. So it has all the living you want. Rental, retail, nice environment. You can walk. And people who don't live there go there just to hang out. No place to go. Maybe I eat, maybe I walk, maybe I window shop. And you find those intersections that you were talking about to say, where does this make sense? Either a track or an intersection, so people know these areas could urbanize and will in turn help your tax base and provide experience and provide housing choices and provide transportation choices. You're growing.
I was surprised that the North Hills area, when they had their plans, I said, this is going to be a nightmare over here. But really, the traffic is less now than it was before they started doing it.
Amen, Mayor. That's what we're trying to say.
And I've been here all my life, and I was like, it takes you getting off on that exit, it was like a nightmare to try to turn and get on and then turn back.
Right. So I live after Six Forks. I remember there was a recent case where John Kane was going in for rezoning. People said the traffic was like, I drive there every morning and every night. Not a problem. Go right there.
With the same signal lights.
Same signal lights. But now people are going to the yoga, they're going to the coffee shop. It's all contained. They're living in a little downtown, midtown, and it's dense.
So how do we, as a municipality, drive development to look like this? Because
Your land. That's what your land use.
Actually, like what we're trying to accomplish is having, the businesses and the residential all in one area.
That is called your plan and your code. People will follow the rules and the laws that you give them to follow. I remember when I was plan director, the council said, we want development downtown, we want residential downtown. And I told them, no, you don't. What do you mean, no, you don't? I said, because your rules and your laws don't say that. You incentivize greenfield development on the edge of town. You make it so hard to do development downtown. I'm just gonna go, it's easy, do a subdivision plat, I'm gone. To go downtown, we want this, we want this, we want that, we want this, we want this, and like, he'll say, no, I'm out, forget it. And so I had to come in as planning director and change the rules and make it easier to get developers to do what we want them to do and make it harder for them to do what we don't want them to do. We had it the reverse. We made it hard for developers to do what we wanted them to do. So it's your plan and it's your code, but it has to start with the planning process so that it's a relationship between you and the residents with your staff guiding the way. You can pick the locations that make the most sense. Now, if you look at Morrisville, they don't have a downtown. They don't have a town center. Park Village became their effort to create a place, and there was nothing there. So that's up to you and your staff. Make sure traffic can flow, can be handled, but people are craving. Otherwise, they're going to drive to Wendell or somewhere else and they say it's not here. You want to capture that revenue, you want to capture that experience, so you work with your staff and you can, but this is a nice simple one. This one's 4 stories, it could be 3 stories. Look how nice that is.
I've been to that one, very nice.
It's very nice, isn't it?
Very nice. They have a lot of music going on, pretty sure you're going to get pizza, you can get people sitting there, you can drive in, of course, very nice.
You can have that.
It's just good, walk downstairs.
Yeah.
And you just don't see it in Raleigh. I mean, Clayton's got this, like, you know,
Yeah.
many communities have this sort of multi-use.
It is. It works. You know, I lived, before our house got built, I lived in P Street in downtown Raleigh. I took an elevator to the Publix on the ground floor. You know how cool that was? I didn't go parking, I just went to the elevator, got shopping. I mean, it was just great. Walk to work. You know, so yes, there are some people who want to drive, but do you offer, I'm not saying the whole town has to be this, but you want to offer this as an option.
So literally like your walking food hall, that place is strategically thought out.
Yes.
Literally, how you can, have grocery stores, some Trader Joe's,
Yes.
and have the residents, they're rezoning now for
Yes.
something else. So
It's used.
Wow.
Not everywhere. Like I said, if you saw our growth framework map, which is what I loved about this map, is that we knew, now, the circles, this was our dream, is that these were all transit stops. That's what this was. This was a light rail. It never happened, but now they're doing BRT here to connect to Garner. This one's going to Nightdale. So these corridors translated to bus rapid transit, but the goal was these circles were the light rail stops, and these became the stations. But so this is the West Raleigh, this is PNC Arena, Blue Ridge, Briar Creek, like I said, Triangle Town Center, Midtown, downtown, and then this was downtown south. That was the vision. So when you see downtown south, you didn't know this, I was a visionary behind downtown south as well as Raleigh Union Station with the help of Eric and Roberta. All that was part of the framework. And then we executed. It can be done.
Here's another one I guess just throw in, when you talk about the BRT and the land use, the effect on the property value.
Yes.
For that light rail.
Light rail is much higher than bus rapid transit. We're going to see how bus rapid transit plays out, but the answer is yes. In fact, side story, I know I'm being taped, but I remember when we had a plan for Raleigh Union Station. I encouraged the city of Raleigh, please buy the land now around the station so that we can control it. We did when it was $2 million. When Raleigh Union Station was finished, John Kennedy, I think, purchased the building for $12 million. It was too late to wrap the game. So we knew that investment would change the dynamics of the area. All right.
So
Future, yes.
One quick question. So with that land purchase, just risk reward, you can project and see. I mean, like I've had in certain areas, land is here. So we buy now with the potential of seeing that future use, just knowing.
Well,
does that make sense? Or is it-
For the city, there's now a real estate economic development question.
Yes, sir.
There are some cases where you want to control the destiny of property. I think that makes a lot of sense for downtowns if you want to reposition your downtown. And there are some uses, so to acquire land and then put it out. we have to have a separate conversation about that. I think my better way is to put the zoning in place that encourages what you want to see, and the rules are in place to encourage it. Most of the stuff that we did, I used to tell the city manager, the land use plan and zoning code, that is our incentive package. Your land is 2 stories, that land use map just said you can go up to 30 stories. That's an incentive. I'll tear down my 2-story building and I can build 30. So we don't have to give away an incentive. The zoning became the incentive. Today, most often the zoning is the disincentive. So you can buy property. There's one client we're working with. They have a gas station in their downtown. They would like to convert to a beer garden. We said you need to acquire it, do a land swap, or change the zoning to make it more valuable for that gas station in the center of your main street, and it's a walkable main street, to transition. So that's where it makes sense, but I wouldn't put the town at risk of just buying up property, because ultimately you're holding it, it's not generating taxes, and you have to figure out how to put it out there where somebody will actually bid on it. So I'm not saying no, but be cautious.
Thank you.
All right, this is one area that was a game changer for our city council in many places that I've worked with. A colleague of mine and I kind of came together because I had to figure out, people kept saying you keep building downtown, and what about us? And so I had to communicate that land has value, and how do you capture that value? This is so important whether a city or a town. Land generates property and sale tax revenue. I don't like the word tax, I like dues, because I have a homeowners association, I'm paying a tax, but we call it dues. Because people hear the word tax, are like, oh, I've lived in my house for 12 months, they already raised my dues. I'm sorry, my homeowner's tax. I can't believe by $16, but anyway. Land equals property and sales tax revenue. And that's what you need to operate. That's your revenue, your income to provide the services and acquire fire trucks. And land is a finite resource. Crudely, it's a commodity. I don't like to say that, but I want at least the point of this conversation. So your planning policy and zoning affects and controls the value and the revenue it generates. That's your job with staff. When you say single family to low density, whatever units to the acre, you've now just valued that land at a certain amount. You increase the value, it translates to, if it's commercial retail, sales tax. Or if it's just regular property tax. And you must be smarter about how you create land value. So this came about with a friend of mine, Chris Larson. I was getting frustrated that they kept saying, why do you keep focusing on downtown? So Chris and I came up with this formula that it would take 600 single-family homes on 150 acres to equal the tax value of 1 acre downtown. And that's the Wells Fargo building. 150 acres, 1 acre, same tax value. So, in fact, the Wells Fargo building had 90 times the tax value per acre. So when I told residents, if you keep saying no to downtown development, what you're really saying is raise my taxes, just like Joe said, I'll pay the tax low, I'll do it. And that building doesn't require the same police, fire, schools, infrastructure. That does. So I want, and council was an aha moment. So we actually had an ROI analysis for all of our projects in our plan. So council understood. When you say no to density, you're saying y'all are going to have to pay the tax level, just like Joe said. Now, I'm not saying I have to build a 30-story building. I'll show some other versions. So that downtown high-rise on 3-acre sites can pay off its infrastructure in 3 years, ROI 35%. A suburban multifamily complex on 30 acres, it would take 42 years to pay off its infrastructure, ROI is 2%. It's your choice. You determine land use. Land use is you're assigning value to the land, as well as what is going to be built on the land. That's yours. with staff advising me. So this came from a friend of mine, Joe Miniposi in Nashville, and he, what a beautiful point. So this is not a high-rise per se. So someone said to him, well, what about Walmart? It produces jobs. He go, yeah, it sits on 34 acres, a downtown 6-story mixed-use building is on a half acre. The real estate taxes on a per acre basis for Walmart is $6,500 per acre basis. That small building downtown, can you see the number? Is how much? 10 times. 10 times. But Walmart produces jobs, it sure does. 6 jobs per acre. That building, 74 pre-COVID. This is your choice. How you determine land use translates to your revenue. So we did it in Raleigh. Our 6-story mixed use downtown generated $110,000 per acre. 3-story office, $30,000. 3 to 4-story residential. Walmart was worse than single family. That's what it generated on the annual, on average. Raleigh, yours may be different. This helped the council understand why land use is important, which then translates to your code. You're telling people what they can and cannot do. You can't stop them, but you can at least say, this is, don't cruelly just look at the revenue. This is the point by saying, you, as a governing body, determine with public input how you're going to grow and what is the value of that land. It cannot be just single family. So we had to communicate the point, and we put a value on a per acre basis on all the parcels in Raleigh, and the darker the color, the higher the value. People just could not. I said, to my staff, nobody can see this. Let's put it in 3 dimensions. Can you tell me where downtown is? Now, this was pre-North Hills. This is now the beginning of North Hills. I mean, this is carrying the tax load for all of this. Just by determining where's the right land use, where you're going to grow to increase more value. It's right here. And you don't have to go 20 stories. I think with this market, 3 or 4 should be enough. I always ask someone, what's the tallest building in your town? It's either the hotel or the hospital, that's it. But I think you can 3, 4 stories, and that will still generate. Think it's your town. I don't subscribe to anybody who goes really higher than that. What is your tallest building?
It's gonna be 3 stories.
3 stories?
But the apartment is gonna be 3 stories.
So what's the tallest building now? Do you know? Joe? Do you know the tallest building? GSK? 4? Yeah, that's what I thought. Yep. All right, we're coming to the, oh, you've got a lot of time there. All right. And I think what we can do is have an open conversation because I think I'm supposed to go till about 10:30. So housing affordability and housing accessibility. So I did a housing profile, talk about variety of housing types, then I'm not sure I'm going to talk about gentrification, but I want to see if that's a concern, because that's one of those words that is what I call a ball of confusion. I have no idea when someone says gentrification, what do they mean? Sometimes it's a poke, sometimes it's real, but it's a convenient word somebody uses to really put you on the defensive. You're gentrifying us. How could you do this? I just don't. So, this is your units. Your 1 unit structures is 77.8%. It's high. 2 or more units and structures is 8.8%, and then the rest of your structures, 13.4%, are mobile homes, are the type of housing. It's a lot on 1 unit structures. So there's some room for change, but that's just to show you where you are today. Owner-occupied housing units, I listed the top 15 cities. Where do you think Zebulon ranks on that list in terms of owner-occupied housing units? You're high. You're high. You are high. You're on the top of the list. This is your population. Now, granted, I did cities. Cary, which is pretty high, they're at 68.4%. Concord is at 67.7%. Zebulon, you're at 69.5%. Top. So there is certainly room to diversify your housing types. So people say, oh, we just want single family. You have that. Now what about the other choices? You have it. And even if you build more, you may drop down about here, but still on the top of the list. So there's room for change. When we were in Raleigh, we started sharing these different housing types. This is in our code: detached, attached, townhouse, apartment. So you can talk about what's right for Zebulon and where. On these nodes, on these corridors, not in the middle of a subdivision. And so this is some of the options you can look at. This is more of a context-based approach. And we even came up with something called a cottage court. These are more condominiums, but these are a nice way of living. It's one lot, parking on the back. It's dense, but these were geared more toward seniors. It's more of a community. Off an alley, and you'd have a nice cluster of these little cottages. And then it took some years. Raleigh finally passed the backyard cottage, or what we call accessory dwelling units. They're more expensive to build, but if I'm aging out and I want to live back there and rent out my house and I'm a senior, great example. What happened at Raleigh is because it was around NC State, oh, it's going to be filled with dorms and kids, and so it just died. And finally, I think last year they passed it. So there are different ways you can increase density. Accessory dwelling units, having two, where you could have two dwellings on one property. Cottage cores, so you don't always have to go vertical, but density doesn't just mean this. Density just means how many people can live on a property.
One quick question on that. I think Wendell just passed something where they could have more than 180. Is that correct, Mike? Wendell just passed that just recently.
I'm not aware of that, but we do allow for accessory dwelling units by right in all residential zoning districts.
You do that. You're good.
So
Because there was a lot of pushback in Raleigh, and a lot of places already had a secondary unit, but over time, those were for service.
Okay.
They were there. But finally, Raleigh put it through, so you're way ahead of the game, Mike. Thank you. And then, if you hadn't heard this term that's emerging, it's called the missing middle. And for those of you who don't know, a friend of mine, Dan Perelic, it's a range of housing scale buildings with multiple units, compatible in scale and form with detached single-family homes. So basically, there's your detached, there's your apartments, missing middle is everything in between. And maybe for you, it's just here. But it's something other than single-family. Heritage conserving infill, duplex, triplex, fourplex, townhouse. Who rents? Now, raise your hand if you believe renters pay taxes, property taxes. They do, through the landlord. Most people assume if you rent, you don't pay property taxes, don't have a stake. You do. You pay your property taxes to the landlord. Who rents? Young professionals, seniors, veterans, individuals, families, or households who cannot afford or do not want to buy a home. Not everyone aspires to buy a home, but they want to live somewhere. People with disabilities, under 65 in Zebulon, you're 12%. And disability is not just a wheelchair, it comes in all flavors. People who relocated to the area looking for a home, and working class. So you should ensure there are housing choices for all. Far too often, when you say rental, people think affordable, low income, my property values, what kind of population. I usually ask everyone, have you ever rented in your life, raise your hand. And on average, everybody in the whole room raises their hand. I'm like, should I be afraid and run? It is a choice. But the question is, are you offering choices? Then, particularly where you're on the generational spectrum, when they hear a rental property coming in, Commissioner, my property values, the traffic, they just don't, this is not consistent with the character of the community. But you have to serve the public interest and look for those housing options. So, is that rental? Home ownership? What kind of missing middle is this? That's missing middle. That's rental. All of it's rental. But it fits into the neighborhood. We're seeing this more and more, and it's done, very attractively. There's another example. This one, the Winston-Salem. Missing middle. These are townhomes in North Raleigh. These homes are going for $500,000 to $600,000 in this townhome. So some feel that, no, you need to spread them out. And that's, okay, I'm showing off, that's right. Oh. So, Joe said it earlier about this question of affordability versus accessibility. I believe it is your obligation to offer those housing choices. It starts with the land use, what you can build there, but you understand different people that need it. You want to make sure you provide that menu so that it's all not single family. When I look at your land use map, that's very heavily single family residential. Do you allow for missing middle, Mike?
Where's the planner when you need him?
Missing middle. Do you allow missing middle in single family, low density residential? I don't know what your classifications are.
Not in the R2 zoning district, but we do in the R4 and up, where we allow for duplexes, and in certain situations, triplexes, as the density increases as you get closer to the core of town.
Your planning director's on it. It's very, so you want to look for some more opportunities. One of the things that we did in the Raleigh Code is there was a lot of concern between the transition of higher density and commercial uses. So we suggested a buffer zone so that by distance, you could put garages there, you could not put high density up against single family. So we spent a lot of time on these transition zones. So if you're pressed with land and can't figure out where to densify it, you always have the option of these transition zones to help mitigate. But the concern about gentrification, when I hear this topic, and you should as well, I stop and say, what do you mean? I've heard so many different definitions of gentrification that aren't gentrification. Let's take East Raleigh, you brought it up.
Yes, sir.
Some people say you were forced out. In some cases, taxes go up, and you have a challenge, but it's different for homeowners than it is for renters. If you're a renter, you're very vulnerable, and you could be asked to leave at any given time. If you're a homeowner, you control the destiny. In East Raleigh, there were some people that had a shack that was worth $60,000, and someone says, I'm gonna give you $300,000. I can retire now. And someone said, you're gentrifying our neighborhood. Excuse me, I can now take my $300,000 and buy some home in Johnson County and live happy. It is a private-to-private transaction. And it happened time after time after time for some of these homes when the state of disrepair, they did not have the money to fix it up, and they saw a way out. And so we have to be very careful when someone says they're forced. I need to say, talk to me more about how they were forced. Because you have to go, sign documents, closing, but I have seen cases where the real estate taxes go so high, they're struggling to stay there. That's legit. If you're a renter, that's legit. But from my perspective, anytime you upzone an area, I think you should have a conversation with the residents that it could increase land values, and you have to figure out a way how to help those residents. But usually it's a private transaction. And so to me, gentrification, I call it revitalization with trade-offs. Because your choice is, I remember when I was Parks Commissioner, they would say, don't fix that park. It will lead to green gentrification. I'm like, what? So I said, okay, I have two choices. If I do nothing, you accuse me of neglect. If I do something, you accuse me of gentrification. I can't win. We have to do what is right and respect a private-to-private transaction. But the renter is the one that is always most vulnerable when it comes to an area changing. And that's where I believe you need to figure out how to help before they just get pushed out, because that's basically what's happening. People are getting pushed out more. Renters, homeowners basically control their destiny to some extent, but you take a step back and people go, oh, it's gentrified. Now, what I'm saying is very controversial. People that will attack me if they've been listening, saying, how dare you say that? Because it's such an emotional word. Because we lost the neighborhood we lived in. It's gone. The culture's changed, and they don't know who to blame. So gentrification becomes the default.
Well, you say fix it, what tools are there that the municipality can have? I mean, we have a area here that's going to potentially go through that. So I, as an elected official, I get that. So, okay, what are you going to do? How are you going to help us out? What is that thing that we're going to do? I don't have the answer. Like I'm saying that.
Habitat for Humanities, whether you could figure out to do, some places doing grants. I don't want to go too far, but I'm doing a lot of research on what's called repairing past harm. It's a version, I want to say reparations, but repairing past harm. Some are coming up pools of money to offer grants for people to help fix up their homes. Some are heirs property, don't have proper title, they can't get a home equity. So there are ways people are doing things through grants, through Habitat and other organizations that are coming in to help do repair, brushes of kindness. So there are approaches that will help folks do that. But you, as a Board of Commissioner, it's going to be hard on your own. But there are many different techniques you can do. But as was stated, the more you say no to development, the pressure becomes greater, and then the housing prices will start to go up. You are going to have the effect of people from other markets coming in. And then when it was a bidding war, they had the wherewithal to bid over it. And so as a result, when you start to do that, especially in Wayne County, it rises up the prices of all homes across the board. What keeps prices down is having more inventory. Inventory keeps prices down, and higher interest rates keep prices down. But you want to be careful that as you say no to development, you now are limiting the inventory, which makes prices cost more. So that's something you have to carefully manage, and your town manager is up on it, seems to be very knowledgeable about that trend. So you have to take all that in consideration.
I don't think for me, it's saying no, it's just that terminology continue to use the code smart, which is somewhat subjective to me. You know what I'm saying? My going smart, then maybe not your version.
This is what we talked about this morning, is growing smart.
Correct.
Knowing number one, growth is coming, and not putting your head in the sand. Growth is coming. Number two, land availability, where is it going to go? Looking at your land use map, that has to match up with transportation. So all that is, one, acknowledging that you're growing. Number two, are you going to do something or do nothing to manage that growth? And then what does that plan look like? To me, those are just the 3 steps. And I met with your staff. They're on it. They're ready. They're ready. The other part is, how do you now manage other residents of your community that says we want to keep it at 8,000, don't grow it. Keep it the way it is. But then I say, but back in 2000, when did you arrive? If we stopped, we saw that trend line in 2000, that's when it jumped up. Suppose they said back in 2000, don't grow. All these folks might not be here. So it's growing smart, is managing that growth. I'm sorry, you had a question?
You had mentioned something about heirs property.
Yes. Big subject.
And I know the League of Municipalities is following the bill to try to make it easier to get a deed because of.
Does everybody know what heirs property is?
That's the biggest issue we have here, but not on land now that we have left, is that it's air property. So you have somebody in there, somebody in New York, they can't come on the same page, so this one just sits there. Some developer comes along, potentially, somehow gets something.
Well, what they do is they seek out one person.
Yes.
And they buy that person out.
Right.
And then
Yes.
they become a member
Forced to sale.
of that heir property.
Forced to
And that's
sale.
the legislature that's
Another
trying to-
trend that we're seeing as people age out, and there's one parent or grandparent and they pass away, the children just want to get the highest and best price. They don't want to stay there. They just want to sell it and move on. That's something you cannot control, but that's a trend we're seeing. I was doing a project in the Atlanta region, and they're saying this whole neighborhood, everyone was kind of retiring at the same time. They're all in their 70s and 80s, and as they sold, the kids just saying, just sell it, just give me the money, I'm out. I don't want to take it. And you see housing prices change there as well, because they just want to unload it, take the money and walk. And so you start seeing those neighborhoods that used to be so connected because they all grew together started to erode and change. But Ayers property is another one, which is a tragedy. Again, if you don't know, Ayers property is, from years ago, you owned a property, you just gave it to your niece gave it to her daughter, and there was really no clear title. The consequence is you can't get a home equity loan, you can't get proper insurance, and people go by like saying, look at the condition of that house, the stuff on the porch, the roof. They don't have the equity because they don't have title. And if you don't, then they just have to figure out how to fix up or let it fall into disrepair. It falls in such a disrepair that it comes to a point where the city wants to condemn it, and it's just a sad, sad episode that it passed down from generation to generation without a clean title. There are places that help people with that, but that is another phenomenon we see, particularly in the Black community. Yes, particularly Black community. All right, so my last slide is smart places. Understand their urgency 10 years before it's urgent. And Zebulon, I know you're smart, so you're all going to figure this out. I'm now open to all questions, any questions, because we have about 10 minutes before we probably need a break. Yes, before we transition to Eric. Any final questions for me? And I do promise I need to get you, as for the household, you were looking for household types, head of households. I will remember to get that to you and send it off to Mike or to Joe. So I want to make sure now, this is all up to you. I just want to share with you a point of view. As a planner, I take a lot of pride in implementation. I believe in my career I've been successful about 80% of the time. So I want all of you to process this. When I look at Raleigh, working with Eric, what I see in Raleigh was basically a lot of work that we're able to do collectively as a community. Went through a planning process, did a comprehensive plan, involved the community, involved everyone, and ultimately we had a blueprint because I wanted Raleigh to be a plan-making place that followed the plan and not make all these deals where people said, where did that come from? And it worked. From downtown to midtown to the corridors to the village district. I think Eric has a slide on Oberlin, the village district. We said, let's put residential around it. I was teaching at Harvard, and students said, my parents live there and they love it. They don't drive, they just walk across the street. There's coffee, there's breakfast, there's clothes, there's it. And we just looked at the existing shopping centers. I would start looking at some of your shopping centers. What you could put around it. 2-story, 3-story. And start to reposition some of these places. Do you remember what North Hills looked like?
Yes. It was just a kid government.
Look at it now. In about 10 years, I think its income, its spike would be higher than downtown. I mean, just look at what it was. Or the village district. When I was there, we allowed all the zone. People went crazy in Cameron Village. We allowed all that density. You see, that was under my watch. We said, oh no, let's just allow density because it reduces parking and it adds more. It's there. So I can go on and on and on. So any parting questions for me before we take a break?
Thanks.
Yes, I'm here for you.
Your insight is always thought-provoking.
Thank you.
And I appreciate it because it just kind of revs up some thoughts about how to do things. But
Thank you,
I
Mayor.
appreciate that.
So, some of the things that I'm taking away from this is that we need to be revisiting our plans every year with making probably some major tweaks and adjustments every 5 years. What we don't have, and that I think that we're probably going to be working towards, is a downtown master plan. And is there anything that we should keep in mind as we start to craft a downtown master plan to be able to, best utilize all of these best practices that you've been talking about?
I would, as a planner, always feel like go big and then in. If I had a recommendation, I would start first with a town-wide comprehensive plan, then move into the downtown.
Is that different than our comprehensive traffic and land use plan?
Yes.
Okay, so what does that encompass as compared to?
A transportation plan, they have chapters which you call elements. Usually it is first your vision, values is the first chapter, land use, housing, transportation, parks. You can choose the categories, but I'll never forget Raleigh's charter says something that really motivated me, that you should have one comprehensive plan versus multiple disintegrated and separated plans. It needs to be comprehensive one. So you can have a land use chapter in the comp plan, the transportation chapter in the comp plan, the parks and rec chapter in the comp plan. So it allows both the city, the town manager, and all the department heads, because the city is one integrated system. And so, but you can start on the downtown plan if there's a sense of urgency there. I'm just saying as a planner, I prefer to be macro and then go micro, because a comp plan will allow you to see what the downtown serves a lot better. And I think if I recall, we did a downtown section of the comprehensive plan because it was so important. But like I said, I don't know your sense of urgency. I'm just saying, as an outside advisor, I prefer to go macro and then go to small area. The downtown plan is a small area.
How would historic sites affect that plan?
When you say historic, there's designated and then sacred from a community cultural point of view. So we need to distinguish, is it designated as historic or is it sacred as a near and dear asset to the community?
I don't know the answer. Mark?
We have a national historic district in downtown. We do have a couple of locations that are on the National Register as specific landmarks, and then several county landmarks.
So-
we don't have a local district.
So generally, depending on the designation, it comes with certain protections. And all I can say is based upon where the designation came from, you need to acknowledge what those protections are. You can't just wipe them away. If you do, there is a process. So it depends whether it's national, state, or local, but you do have to acknowledge the existence of those historic. In my work, people identify sites as historic because they have cultural value or they're sacred for specific reasons, like a church. It's not designated, but so many important things happen there, that's a sacred site. So that's why I was trying to distinguish between historic and what is deemed as sacred. But you do have to take them into account. Okay? Well, everyone, this is work that I love to do, and I'm not saying just look at Raleigh. There are other places that were extremely successful following the plan. What I like about the comprehensive planning process, in Raleigh, it became a way of building a relationship where we mutually agreed on how we're going to grow in the future. And so we had an external strategy, but then an internal strategy where we wanted all the departments to work together. We didn't want them to say it's the planning department's plan, the town manager, and I told them we had to say it's the city's plan, not the planning department's plan. It's all the departments have to have stake in it. And so with that, I will close, we'll take a break, and I'm going to stay till the very end. So if you have another question you want to ask, please feel free. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
How long?
10 minutes.
Now we take a 10-minute break.
Do we have a tab at
Yes.
Yeah.